What's going on, everyone? Chris back again with another episode of What Could Have Been in Wrestling. And what I hesitate to say, I guess, is episode 15? And I say that for a couple of reasons. First of all, I do apologize for the delay. I meant to get this episode up and uploaded this past weekend, but I had a very hectic Friday, which spilled into Saturday, and outside of this, I do work a full-time job, so this is the only time I've had this week to do this, so want to apologize for the delay there. Also, I hesitate to say that it's episode 15 because episode 14, thank you to the people that liked and commented that, got a copyright strike, and it's been taken down by YouTube. My fault, I guess, because while I'm learning about how to enhance these videos and make them better for you, I did use some audio from former WWE Raw clips that I think people saw, and I guess YouTube doesn't like that. So they took it down. So episode 14 about Jerry the King Lawler and what could have been if he was part of the ECW WCW invasion angle in 2001 is lost in the ether. But if you'd like me to re-upload it, this time without some of the live footage, let me know, and I can definitely try to make that happen. So, again now, I'm still going to go with episode 15 on this. Want to say, obviously, thank you to all my subscribers and people who have commented. And I want to talk about what today's topic is. And I want to say a special thank you to Jay Margera27. He is the one that gave me the idea for this topic. And this is going to talk about, and it's going to take us back to really the very start of the Attitude Era in the 90s. And it's going to talk about what could have been in wrestling if Brian Pillman hadn't died in October of 1997. So to start off, obviously, Brian Pillman was found dead, I believe it was October 5th of 1997, in his hotel room. And I think it was announced, because that night it was Bad Blood, the first ever Hell in the Cell match between Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. And it was confirmed that Brian Pillman had been found dead in his hotel room. They did have the 10-bell salute, and fans had some signs in memory of him. And they did, with everyone out on the ramp, they did the 10-bell salute to him, tribute to him, and it was very, very unexpected, I know. From his DVD that came out in 2007, I know that he had a bad addiction with painkillers, so maybe I shouldn't say it was unexpected, unfortunately. But because of the serious ankle injury he had from that bad car wreck, he had an addiction to painkillers that he could not stop. And Ken Shamrock, in a shoot interview, said no one really reached out to help him. So it was very sad to see the state he was always in. And during this time, I'm really just going to focus on, obviously, what could have been right after, had he continued the angle he was in. And going to the start of the real meat of the Attitude Era during, of course, Austin's reign, and really just take it through most of 1998. So again, Brian Pillman, prior to his death, had been feuding with Goldust and had been in an angle with him and Goldust, or Dustin Runnels' then wife at the time, Marlena. During the In Your House pay-per-view the month before his death, in September of 97, In Your House Ground Zero, he had beaten Goldust in a one-on-one match, and the whole stipulation was he got possession of Marlena for 30 days, and he, as he would always stress, 30 long nights. No subtlety with that guy. The whole thing was, obviously, they were having Brian Pillman send in the triple X-Files of him and Marlena in a hotel room, talking about what he was going to do with her that night. And he would have her come out to the ring with him, and she would always have that look on her face like she didn't want to be there. And he would try to make her dress. He had her dress, honestly, like in a dominatrix type outfit, to be honest. And he would always talk about, everything that was so good with Marlena that night before. Obviously, the whole thing was Goldust was finally going to get his revenge. He was going to get his wife back. And Brian Pillman was actually scheduled to face Dude Love at the pay-per-view. And Goldust was going to be handcuffed to the ring post until the end of the match. From what I understand, because they had talked about this on Raw, Goldust and Marlena were going to renew their wedding vows in celebration of the 30 days being over. And actually, what was going to happen was it was going to be revealed that Marlena wanted to stay with Brian Pillman. And it was going to be a big swerve, and Goldust would be left alone getting screwed over, and Marlena was going to turn heel. If you watch Ground Zero 1997, they do drop a subtle hint at that when Sunny, the chick who's in jail right now, real name is Tammy Cinch, she actually had dropped a subtle hint saying that she heard some of the stuff Marlena was saying when she got into Pillman's car, and she said you'd be surprised at some of the things she said. So they were trying to drop some subtle clues there. So again, if Brian Pillman does live beyond, obviously, that In Your House pay-per-view Bad Blood in October, and they do that swerve angle, of course, WWE would have had one of their wedding segments on Raw. And of course, nothing can go cleanly there. And you would have it where Marlena probably reveals when they are doing their vows or whatever that she's happier with Brian Pillman. And then Pillman can come out and attack Goldust, leave him laying, and then, of course, Marlena is leaving with Pillman. And I know in real life they had to pivot because of Pillman's death. They didn't do the wedding angle. But then 2 weeks later, they did a sit-down interview with Jim Ross where Dustin calls off his marriage with Marlena, tells her to take the ring and shove it up her ass, and says that he found someone that truly understands him. I bring this up because I think that would be an important piece to this angle as well. And I want to talk about how we're going to get there. So, leading up to the next pay-per-view, Survivor Series 97, week to week, obviously, now you can have Marlena still coming out with Brian Pillman, accompanying him to the ring, and he can still continue that triple X-Files that he was doing. But this time, it's not so much to rub it into Goldust that he has his wife, but now showing him, I've stolen your wife and she's happier with me. And Goldust obviously can still be a crestfallen character, be very stoic and act like part of him is missing, because I know when Marlena was gone, he was only painting half his face because his other half was gone. And I think what they would do there, obviously, is have another match at Survivor Series. So this time you would have Goldust, rather than being on the American side versus the Canadians in that elimination match. I think you'd have the one-on-one match, him versus Pillman. And believe it or not, I still think you should have Pillman win that match, because I think you want to continue this angle a little longer, and to get heat on Marlena and Pillman as a duo, they need to win that match. And I think, again, it's because Marlena costs the Goldust the match. The reason I would say this, obviously, like I said, is because of the heat you want to keep on Marlena and Brian Pillman. But I think in reality, the angle might get cut short from there. Because I think everyone knows Survivor Series 97, something happened that night to Bret Hart, and Brian Pillman, outside of this angle, was also very closely associated with the Hart Foundation. He was never considered an actual member, but it was always a close associate. And of course, he was still on that team when they did the 10-man tag at Canadian Stampede, in July of that year. So, even if Ryan Pillman hadn't died when he did, Bret still would have gotten screwed out of the belt against Shawn Michaels. And I know in an act of protest, obviously, Neidhart and the Bulldog both left, got out of their contracts, paid some money to get out. Owen tried to get out, and I know Vince didn't let him. And I think Cornette on his podcast said he actually gave Owen Hart a raise and wanted to keep him. That was the one Hart member he wanted to keep. And I think, to be honest, I think McMahon, despite the injuries to Pillman and his very limited use in the ring because of his injuries and his addiction to the painkillers, I think Vince would still want to keep Ryan Pillman. Because that's a guy who had jumped ship from WCW to the WWF just a year before. And I think Vince would want to keep that open because he wouldn't want a guy who had just come over from the WCW. I sound like Bret Hart now calling it the WCW. I don't think he'd want him jumping back that quickly to the other side because everyone who was watching at that time knows WCW was consistently winning the Monday Night Wars week to week. And I think he would want to try to salvage what he could out of that. And also because he had paid Pillman that guaranteed contract. Thing is, going forward, I think it would have been difficult because I think obviously to build heat on Pillman and Marlena, they still would have had he still would have had the Hart Foundation at his back, so Marlena can still have been a pseudo-valet for the Hart Foundation for that month, going into Survivor Series as a heel. And I think actually when the Hart Foundation is off screen, while you still have the Marlena and Pillman pairing, I think what would have been tough is obviously him not having his backup at this point. And the reason, again, I think this angle would get cut short is, one, I think Pillman would have probably, even though Vince would have wanted to keep him, I think Pillman might have tried to get out of his contract in regards to out of loyalty to Bret, and also because Eric Bischoff in Pillman's DVD from 2007, shortly before the end of his life, unfortunately, Bischoff did claim that Pillman had called him one night and talked to him about the potential of a return. While I don't think, like I said, I don't think Vince would have let him out of the contract due to basically the perception of the guy coming from WCW and then wants to go back immediately after just like a year and a half. I do think, obviously, like I said, it would have been hard to keep the Goldust angle going because Owen Hart was off TV for the following month until he returned to Generation X in Your House. And obviously, Pillman would have been on the Hart Foundation side, and he would have been against DX when Shawn Michaels made his heel turn. And the thing is, I don't see how you can separate the babyface Owen Hart when he returned in '97 from Pillman so easily. So here's what I think would have happened, and I really think that this is another reason. And another reason I think this would have happened, I should say, is because Pillman, even if he hadn't died of the overdose, what they think is an overdose that October, he still had the painkiller addiction, and he still was always in tremendous pain because of the operation on his ankle, and also because of just the wear and tear on the road, they said, and he could only have about 4 to 5 minute matches. I think what they would have done is after Survivor Series, Goldust finally would have gotten some revenge on him. And I think what would have happened is Goldust beats down Pillman with a chair. And similar, obviously, to like what he did with Marlena in '98 when she tried to get back with him when he came back as the Goldust character after converting to Dustin Runnels for a bit. He tells Marlena, "You blew it with me, and I'm done with you. and now I'm done with Pillman. And I think they would have written Marlena off by doing another swerve because Vince Russo was the head writer at the time. And I still think they would have brought in Luna Vachon. Luna was the one Goldust was talking about when he broke it off with Marlena and when he said he found someone that understands him. I still think they would have brought in Luna Vachon and she could actually attack Marlena and that would write her off TV. And then the Pillman beatdown would put him more in a sympathetic role. One, because I think people would look at him still as an ally of Owen Hart. And Owen Hart, like I said, came back as a babyface. So they expect him to feud with DX. And also, I think just the beatdown and then the pairing of Goldust and Luna would get boos. So I think in time, ultimately, it would basically be a quick double turn where Pillman is the babyface and Goldust becomes the heel. Thing is, though, I actually think this keeps Pillman off of TV for quite a while. And, excuse me, I don't think we see actually Pillman. I don't even think he does the Rumble. I think they keep him off of TV through there. And because then that's when he was consistently started working with Luna Vachon, Goldust, that is, as a heel act, and I think they still would have gone that route. I think actually you wouldn't see Pillman again. Personally, I don't think you would have until after the Royal Rumble, and that's when Owen Hart's angle, basically trying to get after Generation X, started heating up, and I actually think you would have had a quick babyface turn by Brian Pillman. And I think actually you would see him coming. I think you would actually see him coming through the crowd the night after the Royal Rumble, the night after Shawn Michaels had beaten The Undertaker in the casket match when Kane set the casket on fire, and when DX was doing their segment in the ring mocking The Undertaker. I actually think you would have Owen Hart and Pillman come out and attack Triple H and Shawn Michaels. And this is actually another way, again, that I think you would get basically the last remnants of the Hart Foundation out of DX's hair. Because, again, Owen never really got to Shawn Michaels. He had one match with him on the last Raw of 97. And then his big victory over DX was winning the European title against Goldust when Goldust was cosplaying as Triple H. So they never really put Owen Hart in a favorable position to really get revenge for his brother. And this is what I think would have happened. Again, you would want to keep Pillman limited in the ring, mainly because of his injuries and because of, his inability to have a very long match. You can have him do the quick run-in, like I said, with Owen, so them as a quick team. I don't even know if you consider it a babyface turn when thinking about it. I just think part of the crowd might side with him since he's with Owen and he's fighting and representing a guy who got screwed over. Granted, he has now moved on to WCW, but they're still trying to carry on the Hart name. What I think would have happened there is, because I know they had the thing with Vince telling Owen, you're not going to run through the crowd anymore. You're going to walk down to the ring like every other superstar. I actually think what would have happened is they could have done an angle where where McMahon tried to tell Pillman the same thing, that you're still under contract here, and these ambush sneak attacks through the crowd have to stop, and if they don't, I'm going to release you of your contract. So, instead of a match, like I said, considering Pillman's injuries, you can have him not listen at all to McMahon, and while Owen eventually just got his regular entrance with his regular theme music, you can have Pillman come through the crowd one more time, try to attack DX, and that's when Commissioner Sergeant Slaughter could come out and tell Brian Pillman that he's indefinitely suspended. So that would, I know, that would take him out of No Way Out. This can happen actually out of No Way Out, so you can keep that card the same, especially with Shawn Michaels not wrestling on No Way Out. Half of DX is missing, so not as big a reason for Pillman to even be involved. And that I think this would also force him to miss WrestleMania as well. And I think actually Pillman would stay off TV until the big night when WWF, at the time, on Raw, broke Nitro's 83-week win streak of the ratings battle. And yes, I'm talking about the match that didn't happen. When they build it up, it was Austin versus McMahon. I know, because in that situation, Stone Cold's former partner, Dude Love, came out. First, he acted like he was going to attack Vince, but then he put the mandible claw on Austin, and the match was called off. So what you can do in this situation is, I think that Brian Pillman would be slotted into that role as the first challenger for Stone Cold's WWF title. When Vince and Austin are having their stare down, you can have Pillman come out and attack Stone Cold, similar to what he did in 1997 when he sided with the Hart Foundation over Austin. And you can have him attack Austin while Austin has the arm tied behind his back, beat him down with a chair, and that would establish him as the number one contender. And this would be a feud a long time coming. And they can obviously play back on their history as tag partners in WCW. But then more recently, kind of conflicted at first who to back in this title match. Because, again, you would have to remember that Vince still obviously wouldn't fully trust Pillman being the loose cannon. And, of course, he still wouldn't want to have Austin as champion. So, I think the big thing is you can have Austin and Pillman face off at the next pay-per-view, which was Unforgiven. And Austin can win that match in a similar fashion where he actually nails Vince with a chair in the head. And then you can actually have... they probably don't need to have him pin Pillman. He can probably just win via countout. Again, after Austin takes out McMahon, he can stun Pillman on the outside or hit him with the chair and then roll back in and win via countout. I think you need to have a fucked finish there because it still needs to set up the rematch at Over the Edge in May of 1998 now. During this time for this angle, that's when the angle between Foley, what they did obviously back then was Dude Love versus Stone Cold, and they had obviously Dude Love go corporate and come out with like a shirt and come out in a blazer and come out with his hair, out of his face in a ponytail and shaven. And I think you could have actually done the same kind of thing with Brian Pillman. What you could do there is you can actually have him tone down the loose cannon. And when he wants his rematch with McMahon, he can tell Vince, I'll be the guy you want. I'll be the corporate champion. Stone Cold can never be. And now you can have Pillman, like I said, turn down the loose cannon gimmick, come out dressed up with his hair done, his hair out of his face, combed, and in a suit, similar to what he wore and what he looked like when he did his WWF contract signing in '96. And rather than being the screaming loose cannon Pillman, he can talk very quietly, be very reserved, and obviously have the backing of Vince and the Stooges, Patterson and Briscoe. I think it would work out well because this is a side of Pillman people hadn't seen. And, Jim Ross could obviously give his opinion saying, This guy was going crazy for the past 2 years where no one could trust him, and now he's sucking up to the boss just to get a title shot. And you can still do a lot of the same segments where Vince is the special guest referee for the match. And then you can also have it where you can still do like the spots where Vince gets arrested on Raw for assaulting Stone Cold. And you can still have the build be between, again, Austin McMahon, but also having Pillman as the main foil to Austin and his opponent rather than Dude Love. So at Over the Edge, again, it would be Austin versus Brian Pillman for the WWF title. No holds barred. And, excuse me, I think this time that's where Austin obviously pins Pillman cleanly. And, you can do just to protect Pillman's limitations. I can't talk today. You can have it, obviously they're using chairs, tables, the steps, and I know for the entrance they had cars on the entrance that they used in the match, so they can use all the props to prolong the match, but also give Austin things to work with and also give Pillman things to work with as well to get over Pillman's physical limitations with his ankle. The next night on Raw, you can have Vince do what he did with Mick Foley. He had fired Dude Love from the company because he didn't do what he said he was going to do, and he did not take the WWF title from Austin. And with that, I think actually you could just have Vince berate Pillman and dress him down, talk about how he's amounted to nothing since being signed, and then you can have it where Pillman actually can still be the cowardly heel and tell Vince he just needs one more chance, and the way he will get his title shot back is he's going to go and win, just like how he can actually bring up Bret and Owen and say, just like how my friends from the Hart Foundation, Bret Hart and Owen Hart, did, I'm going to win the King of the Ring, and I'm going to win the WWF title from Austin on my own accord without your help. So you can have Pillman still enter the King of the Ring now, going into that summer, and I don't think he would make the finals, but I do think he would actually face Ken Shamrock, and I think he would obviously lose, and you can still have, obviously, Shamrock winning the King of the Ring. So now Pillman's kind of at an influx because he doesn't really know where to go. He doesn't have a title shot. He doesn't have the backing of anyone. And I think you actually wouldn't see him on TV for a few weeks after King of the Ring. Now I'm going to get into the whole situation because, again, Austin obviously was feuding with Kane and The Undertaker that summer, going into July with Fully Loaded, and then going into SummerSlam. And what I think what can happen here is Austin obviously Austin, when feuding with Kane and The Undertaker and Mankind, at Fully Loaded, you had Austin and The Undertaker get together as a team and face for the tag team titles. They faced Kane and Mankind. I actually never liked that because they did the whole thing, of course, where Austin and Undertaker won the titles, just to lose them back like 3 weeks later to Kane and Mankind when Kane pinned The Undertaker. And then, of course, it was revealed that Kane and The Undertaker were in cahoots and acting on the same side. You can still have that cahoots angle, but I don't think Fully Loaded should have been Austin and The Undertaker versus Kane and Mankind. Because they did the whole thing where Undertaker hadn't shown up to the building, and Austin was going to have to team with the Brooklyn Brawler if Undertaker didn't show. And of course, then The Undertaker shows up like 10 minutes, allegedly, before the match starts. What I think you can do there, then, is give Austin and Pillman that brief reunion. Since Pillman is pissed off at McMahon because of how his falling out ends after Over the Edge, you can have Austin come out at Fully Loaded to face Kane and Mankind for the tag titles and just say he's going to do it by himself. But then Pillman's music hits, and then Pillman comes out to tag with Austin. So you can actually have them get together, obviously, and do a quick Hollywood Blondes reunion. And then you can obviously have the match go down, but I don't think Austin and Pillman should win. I think you can still have The Undertaker eventually come out, and much like he did at King of the Ring, he can come out with a chair and act like he's trying to hit Mankind, but then nail Stone Cold, take him out, and then I think what would happen there is then Kane could then, now Brian Pillman's out because Stone Cold's been nailed with the chair accidentally, allegedly. You can then have a Kane then chokeslam and tombstone Brian Pillman, and Brian Pillman can take the fall to protect Stone Cold since he was the WWF champion. You can have Austin then come out and tell Pillman, look, I didn't ask for your help. I don't need your help. And Pillman can then tell him, look, I didn't do this for you. I did this for me. Because like you, I hate Vince McMahon. And also because he could say, I still want to have a chance to be a champion one time here in the WWF. So you can have a short-lived, like I said, the Hollywood Blondes reunion. And while that happens, you can have Vince try to sow some seeds of dissension between the two. And he could, again, remind Pillman that Stone Cold was the one who attacked him and broke his ankle. But then also talk about how Stone Cold also broke into Pillman's house. And also tell Austin, do you think you can trust this man when Pillman is the one who pulled out a gun on you? So you can use, obviously, their history there, the gun incident from November of 96, I believe it was. And then, of course, obviously, Pillman pointing the gun at him while Pillman's supposed friends were forcing Austin out of the house. And if you go back and watch that segment, it was actually pretty innovative for its time. It also almost got Raw kicked off of USA, with Austin also beating up two random guys who were supposedly Pillman's friends in his driveway. I think he threw one guy into a kiddie pool, getting a little off topic, but it was kind of funny, while trying to break into Pillman's home. Pillman then basically could be the guy who is backing up Stone Cold while it's revealed that The Undertaker and Kane are working together. And so now, obviously, while The Undertaker has Kane, at least Austin has a little bit of help with Brian Pillman. Going into that SummerSlam, I think you can actually, again, I think Pillman would be written off TV because, again, I said it would be a short-term alliance. And because, as sad as it is, I don't know, based on how, again, from that Ken Shamrock interview, I don't think Pillman's health issues would have improved and his pill addiction would have changed. And I think by that point, he probably would have been written off TV. You can have Kane attack him at a Hell in the Cell, because they did do a Hell in the Cell on Raw the week before SummerSlam. And you can have Vince McMahon order Brian Pillman to step into the ring with Kane and face him at in the Hell in the Cell. And then Kane obviously can take out Pillman from there, and that would write him off TV. Because I do think he either would have been sent to rehab by that point, or honestly, I think Vince would have seen that with his physical limitations, there's not much more he could do with him. And to be honest, I do think that Pillman would have probably been released and gotten an opportunity, if needed, to go back to WCW just a year later than possibly expected. So you can write off Pillman at that point from SummerSlam, and even if he does stay with the WWF, I think that you would have seen him move down the card and not working with Austin as much, because then we would have gotten into the fall with the Deadly Games tournament, and the focus was also shifting to The Rock in the formation of the corporation. So while he might have been a foil to the corporation, potentially, I don't really think he would have been, especially with his ability to not have long matches, unless it was a tag match or something. I just don't think there would have been a lot of room for him in the company at that point. If he did stay with the WWF and not get released, and say he'd been able to possibly go to rehab and get some of his pill addiction under control, to close out 1998, say he comes back later in that late fall, to close out 1998 and going into 1999, which is where I'm going to end it, I think he would have transitioned back to working with Owen Hart. Because Owen Hart that fall had done that fake retirement angle after supposedly injuring Dan Severn with another pile driver. And then Owen and Jeff Jarrett were both coming out at times in the blue blazer costume. And of course with Owen saying, "I'm not the blue blazer." And I think in those quick rolls is where you could have used Pillman, so he doesn't have to exert himself too much and not obviously have to work long matches. You could have him interfere in matches as the Blue Blazer on behalf of Owen Hart. And obviously you could have had a quick trio with him, so Brian Pillman, Owen Hart, and Jeff Jarrett. And of course, obviously, with one of them always coming out in the Blue Blazer costume to help each other. And even if that angle does follow through, unfortunately, we know with the Blue Blazer gimmick what happened with Owen Hart. So it really just feels that Pillman's whole run would have been snake bitten by, like the Screwjob, injuries, and then of course we know what would have happened with Owen Hart through the Blue Blazer gimmick angle going into that early spring. So unfortunately, even if he's part of that angle in a trio with Jeff Jarrett and Owen Hart, that obviously would have been cut short as well. So that's actually where I'm going to stop now. Let me know if you would want to see another part of this, or if you'd want me to give an alternate take of what I think might have happened had he gone to WCW with Bret Hart in '97, along with the Bulldog and the Anvil. Because again, Pillman did have that association with the Four Horsemen, so it could have made for some interesting angles there as well. So again, everyone, thank you very much for the support, and again, apologies for not getting a video up last weekend. Definitely let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section, and let me know what you think, obviously, and what you might want me to talk about in the future. And I definitely will want to get to them and hear your opinions. Also, please like and subscribe, because it helps the algorithm, and obviously it gets me closer to my goal of 1,500 followers, because I have said once I get 1,500 followers, I'm going to get a green screen. Obviously, you probably see, that the background is different today. And I want to just mention that because one of my good friends has given me some pointers, and the lighting has been an issue at times with some of these videos, and I am still learning and trying to get better with this whole thing. So the closer I get and the faster I get to 1,500 subscribers, that's when I'll get a green screen and try to make this look better and better for all you guys, because I definitely appreciate everyone's comments and support. And again, special thanks to JMargera27 for this suggestion. Definitely appreciate it. Please keep the ideas coming. And besides that, though, the one other thing I wanted to talk about was in 6 days, the Vince McMahon series is dropping on Netflix. I think that's September 25th. And I want to know if you people would want to see me talk about that and do a review on that series. I did mention that last episode with Lawler, but that's been taken down. So I don't know if anyone got to hear about that suggestion. But also let me know down below if you'd want me to talk and do a recap and my thoughts on the Vince McMahon series that's dropping on the 25th on Netflix. Thank you again, everyone, and until next time. And I promise it won't be another weekend where I miss an upload. Take care, guys.